I think there was like this one panel that said "Come World."
Yeah, I don't usually read comics on the bus for that exact reason.
Because you only read like really filthy comics. I'm first generation immigrant and I don't even speak the language that my surname's from.
I speak mine.
Well done.
I have an A-level in it.
I think we should just randomly drop into Polish at various points during the podcast.
I'm not going to... No. Well, no one would understand, so what's the point?
I don't know. We might have Polish listeners.
Definitely.
Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, we've got one.
We have you because you're here.
Right, well, we're podcasting now, so
Okay.
if either of you are feeling a bit nervous, then it doesn't matter, you're already podcasting, it's fine.
Lovely.
Cool.
This is We Have Issues. I am famously bad at starting podcasts, and the last week I actually had some stuff prepared, and this week I don't. This is We Have Issues.
Hello.
It's the second episode.
Okay.
I'm Nick. I was on the first episode, that's good. I think it means I've got staying power. I'm a familiar face for the listener.
You're the veteran, really.
Yeah, it's important in ongoing like sequential media to give people something like for them to come back to. And I am that thing on this podcast. I'm the reason people keep coming back. That's not entirely true at all. In fact, it's not remotely true at all. Also in the room is John.
Hi.
That's not your real voice.
It kind of is, because I just said it in my voice, which was hi.
That's better. Your voice is more like that, the second thing you did. Right, okay. And that's John, who I have podcasted with before. It's all about, I'm just saying, it's all about me this week, isn't it? What's that about?
It's egotistical, really.
Yes, I'm terrible. I'm dreadful. And Jessie.
Hello.
That's Jessie over there. Listener, over there means absolutely nothing to you. I'm sorry. Geographically.
Across the table.
Yeah, across the table. Yeah. She's across the table. They're both across the table from me. It feels a little bit like I'm being interviewed for a job. This is We Have Issues. We are going to start talking about comics really, really soon. We have been talking about comics for about half an hour already and getting increasingly angry about stuff, which is good. We've been getting all of the poison out before we started recording because we are going to try and be positive about comics. That's what we want to do. Neurotic about real life, positive about comics. That's what I think. You can listen to the first episode of this show at wehaveissues.net, and you can subscribe to us on iTunes and on Stitcher and all of the other places where people subscribe to averagely good podcasts. If you have iTunes on your phone or on your computer or anywhere, please rate and review us, even if you don't use iTunes. You've got to make it on iTunes, or else you might as well not be podcasting. And that's all this show is about. This show is about getting thousands of listeners and eventually making us all rich.
We're all really ambitious.
Yeah, I'm incredible. You can tell I'm 41 and I've just started making stuff in the last 3 or 4 years. So clearly very, very ambitious. Some of us are doing better than others. Jessie has a very good social networking profile.
Instagram famous, clearly.
Amazing social media footprint, which we are hoping to capitalise on with this show. That's not true. We've got her here because she's good. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter at IssuesPod. I've decided I'm doing all the admin right at the beginning. Sorry, guys. You can follow us on Twitter at IssuesPod. And you can send us emails at issuespod@gmail.com. wehaveissues@gmail.com was taken up to about wehaveissues 72 or 97 or something, which is why we don't have that. So, as it's the second episode, and as you two haven't been on an episode before, I think you need to explain how you got into comics. Because I think that's all people really care about. They don't want to know anything else about you. Who's going first?
I don't know. Oh, okay, me.
You, John.
Right. I got back into comics. Well, the thing is, I can't remember a time in my life where I didn't have a comic somewhere within about 10 feet of me. I still remember the first comic I was ever bought was issue 3 of the UK Transformers. And oddly enough, I reread it about 3 or 4 months ago. And suddenly realised, I remember when I read it when I was 3, and my nan sat and read it with me. She got really confused because I kept asking her who all the individual characters were, and she did not have a clue. She was even more in the dark than I was. But my parents always bought me comics, and growing up, my parents were very, very religious, and as a result, they didn't let me watch a lot of cartoons like He-Man or Thundercats, Dungeons and Dragons. And a lot of stuff was really sort of like, no, they thought it was demonic. They took it away from me. But for some reason, they always let me read comics. And so comics kind of became my way to read the sort of stories that my parents wouldn't usually let me read.
It's properly subversive.
And yeah, and the weird thing is that they wouldn't ever let me watch all these sort of cartoons like He-Man or Thundercats because they thought they'd warp my fragile little mind. And the whole time I was sat there reading comics, which actually got me into a lot of other ideas and actually affected my mind in a lot of ways. It made me think about stuff that I previously hadn't, and probably did way more damage to me than an episode of He-Man ever would. And my parents were completely unaware of this, and I think they obviously thought it was a bit weird that their 14-year-old was still reading comics, but, well, they were Sandman comics, and I just discovered there were loads of them in my local library.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things that got me is, and I think anyone who gets into comics should spend 6 months to a year just reading comics from a library. Don't buy them. Don't look for anything that's got a 1 on the spine. Just grab anything and read it. Read it completely out of context, and oddly enough, I think that helps you deal with the, oh my god, what if I don't understand the continuity better than anything? Like, I read so many bits of comics in such the completely wrong order, and then later on I had to go back and reread them in the right order, and it was, oh no, it all makes sense. And the thing is, I think up to about the age of sort of 19, 20, I was pretty much just finding my way by whatever was on the shelf in front of me. And then I actually found a copy of Watchmen, having never heard of it, just went, oh, okay, I'll just read this. And it kind of, I don't know, it had the effect on me that I think it has on everyone the first time they read it. Mm-hmm. This kind of moment of, oh my god, this is actually a bit more than just a bunch of people in tights punching each other. Though it does have that. So yeah, that was what pretty much got me into the, well, actually, maybe this isn't something I just want to read in the library. It was something I actually started to go out of my way to buy and to actually spend a considerable amount of my income on. And one day I'll probably have so many comics I'll need to build a house out of them to live in, because I'll have sold the house to buy comics. But that's pretty much how I ended up where I am now. Destitute, broke, and with a lot of comics.
That's a really heartwarming story, John. Jessie, when did you start reading? It wasn't that... How long ago was it?
Well, it depends, because, I don't know, I probably started getting issues and that kind of thing 2 years ago, but then before that, I watched Sin City when it first came out, and I was like 7 or 8. Yeah, my parents don't really have this whole, oh, perhaps she shouldn't be watching this. My dad was just like, oh, it's really cool. It's like recorded in a really weird way. And I was like, yeah, let's watch it. And then blood and sex and everything that was in that. Yeah, I know.
Literally blood and sex and everything.
Yeah. And then my dad brought me the comic book, which I found was really interesting. And I hadn't really come across anything like it before, because it was like a book, but it wasn't. And I don't know. It
when you were 7?
Well, I know. Well, I was 8 when I saw the movie. It was like 2 years later, maybe. My dad sort of found it at car boot sale, and he thought, oh, that was that one movie that I let Jessie watch. And then sort of, I started getting into art over the last sort of, I don't know, 5 years, I guess. And then, I don't know, I fell in love with comic art. And I was like, well, surely I should read some of it instead of just sort of drawing like random characters. So I went to pick up like some comic books from Forbidden Planet, and I panicked and I felt so alienated from everyone, and I felt like a noob. So the first comic I grabbed was Deadpool, and I ran out the shop. So I paid for it, obviously.
I was about to ask that.
I'm not just stealing.
But that's okay, because you love Deadpool.
I do like Deadpool,
Like,
yeah.
to the extent that it's part of one of your screen names on,
Yeah.
at least on Tumblr, I think.
And Instagram, yeah.
Yeah. So, do you think that, I'm not psychoanalyzing you, don't worry. Part of it is obviously that you like the character.
Yeah.
But do you think that part of that is also because literally it was a lifeline, it was the first thing you read, and so...
Yeah, definitely. That's why I haven't changed the screen name yet, like on Instagram, even though, like, that's the first one I had. I still haven't changed it because that was still, and since I do sort of run an Instagram comic type of thing, I don't want to change that now. It's sort of what started me off, I guess.
It's fair enough. It's also completely anonymous, so you can do crimes under that screen name and no one will know.
It's got my full name on it as well, though.
Okay, well that doesn't work then.
Yeah. Screwed up.
That was concise. That was good. Mind you,
All right.
you're still young. No, that's good. I like it. It's good. John, I have known for about 100 years, because I've known John for longer than I've known John.
You guys are not, like, old. Wow.
Well, we had, I think that I was in a pub, with some of my friends, and John was at a table next to us with some of his friends, and they were either talking about comics or films. I think this was you.
We were having a conversation about Superman and the Hulk. I won't go any further into the details of what the conversation was about, but you and your friends, it was really something I'd rather not reveal on this.
What actually happened, and anyone who's known me for any length of time knows not to do this, was my friend went either to the bar or to the toilet and left me on my own, and there were people I didn't know at the table next to me talking about something that I was interested in.
Yeah.
So I basically just intruded on their conversation, and that was it. And then, so that's when I first met John, but then there was a gap of several years. I did not know that he had a religious background, or that your parents were religious. That's quite fascinating, because comics are so subversive. You've got opposite comics origin stories.
Definitely, yeah.
Your dad threw like one of the worst ones at you.
Yeah, look at this. Drugs, sex and crime and death.
I think the comic's worse than the film. It's more graphic, isn't it?
Because
Frank Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is Frank Miller, and there's a lot of description in it, and I was like, oh, what does a virgin mean? Great.
Of course, because they like even the really straightforward words, let alone the bit where he's pulling someone's penis off.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's random. And it moves on. I was so oblivious as a child.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think it's interesting. So you said about your whole thing with Deadpool and how he's now like part of your screen names and everything. But for me, even now, like the UK Transformers run is, I think there's an episode of the Momcast where I basically start talking about one of the UK Transformers comics, and about half an hour to 45 minutes later, me and Nick have just basically dissected the entire thing and just completely gone into it. And it really sort of freaks me out that, like, it's like I said when we were at London Film and Comic Con, and somebody that was there, it was Gibson, I think.
Oh, London Super Comic Con.
London Film, LFCC.
Oh, I wasn't there.
We were in the bar. You were there.
That was London Super Comic Con. Sorry, Jessie.
Sorry.
That's
and,
all right.
and listener.
No, the one that you volunteered at.
Yeah, that was London Super Comic Con.
But Gibson took me over and was like, him and I got talking about Transformers, and he was like, oh yeah, Jeff Senior, he's over there as it happens. I was like, really? But yeah, come and meet him. And just took me over to meet this guy who, when I was 11, was one of my heroes, and I practically just turned into this starstruck youngster. And I was just like, talking to someone whose work I, like, absolutely worshipped for years, and the only thing I could think of asking him was, yeah, I read somewhere that Mr. T Snickers advert, was that you? And he went, yeah, I made that. I was like, cool.
The Transformers, we're not going to talk about it loads, but because John can go on about it for ages. But Transformers is kind of unique, and even though I don't read the comics, I find it's quite cool that, because the comic got a life of its own. The toys were one thing, and then there was a cartoon, and then I can't remember what order it is. But but the comic lasted long, like had the longest sustained story in it, didn't it?
Basically the comic, what happened was the UK comics were just following the American ones up until the point where the movie came out, at which point Simon Furman, who was the writer, just basically took the movie and turned it into the basis for about the next 250 odd issues or
It was
something.
weekly, wasn't it? And it went on for years, yeah.
And he just produced this enormous story. And I find it really weird because the movie got so many bad reviews when it came out, and it was a complete failure.
You mean
The animated movie.
The animated movie, not the Michael Bay one.
Though they
Just
are
to clarify.
failures of their own.
Okay, because I was getting mad about the Michael Bay already.
But, and basically, I remember seeing it as a kid, and then all of a sudden going into these comics, and they took what was a movie and just turned it into something that was borderline mythic, and it was incredible.
But what's kind of unique about it is there's 80s things are always getting revived all the time. Well, older things are always getting revived, and all the 80s cartoons. And there's a DC I'm not even sure how long they've had the license for, but there's the He-Man comic, and there's always Thundercats things. The weird thing about Transformers is that in the last few years they got the original team to
reproduce IDW.
They got Simon Furman back.
Furman and Andy Wildman and a few other people back, and they basically just took where Furman's unfinished story had ended in the American comics and finished it off. They've also done the same with Larry Hama's G.I. Joe, but that's still going.
And that happened more recently, though, didn't it? The Transformers thing was
more recent, and it had a very definitive ending, which was it got to issue 100 and just produced one of the most mind-melting endings I've seen to anything. It was a proper sort of, hang on, what? Oh, God. It just turned my brain into mush. It was brilliant.
I think I remember.
The sort of reason I like the Transformers comics was because their ideas about science were just so ridiculously bizarre. And it's like I said, it always goes back to think my parents thought, Transformers, they're robots in space, it's harmless, it's fine, there's nothing sort of in that will make him think about sort of like magic or religion or anything. And then all of a sudden it was just like, oh, these robots have got their own god who's in a planet. It's brilliant.
Who isn't the Christian God.
Yeah.
So, nah. But it's quite unusual. And I know that Chris Claremont got to have a go, got to go back to the X-Men about 8 years ago or 9 years ago, didn't he? And sort of continue some of his stuff on. But I just think that's kind of cool.
It's a nice idea.
We've been quite upbeat. I think now is a good time to cut to. That's a bit of a technical term, to go to Kehaar, who is one of our contributors, so that he can talk about the Nam, the comic about Vietnam. Just because I think we're being a bit too cheerful, and that should sort everything out, sort the listener out. That was almost professional what I just did then. I'm quite pleased with that.
Hi, Kehaar here from Dissecting Worlds. Just to report in on a very interesting read of the first two trades, thanks to Liverpool Library Service, of the NAM, which collects the first 30 issues of the 84 odd issues of what, based on reading those first 30 issues, is pretty much Marvel Comics' Charlie's War. It has a similar art style, which, while the equipment is displayed with great vicissitude, it has a cartoonish aspect to the characters, but that's quite helpful. When everyone's wearing uniforms, you want to be able to tell characters apart. Telling the story of the Vietnam War from an FNG, a flipping new guy, joining a unit of the 25th Mechanised Infantry in Vietnam. It takes you through a combination of internal dynamics in a unit, counterinsurgency operations, behind the lines, rest and recreation in Vietnam. When Ed, at the end of his year, because each issue, which was issued monthly, corresponds to a month in Vietnam, so he comes to the end of his tour and goes, but you carry on with a new set of characters and see new issues there. While it was a Comics Code approved comic, it does manage to touch on atrocities in war, both by the Americans and the forces they were supporting, but also by the Viet Cong, which do sometimes seem to be a little forgotten by some of the Bernard write-ons amongst us. It deals with the home front and how things changed while people were away in Vietnam, and overall it was an effective read. Having read it and looked on Wikipedia, I'm a little disappointed to see, because of falling sales, the Punisher got roped in. He became more and more part of the established Marvel Comics superheroes universe. But I would strongly recommend getting these 2 collected editions to read by your preferred method. Kehaar from Dissecting Worlds signing out.
We're back. Should we talk about comics? Do you guys want to talk about comics?
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to go first? John, you go. No, I'll go first. Well, I don't know. It's up to you. I'm a veteran.
Yeah.
John's a veteran too.
I'm like level 1 at this point.
But not like a NAM veteran, so
He's not
don't
like
worry, it's not like that.
The NAM veteran. Just before we went to Kehaar, I said the NAM. John and I grew up with Vietnam being the secret origin of every TV program character.
Yeah.
Magnum was in NAM, the A-Team were in NAM, everyone was in NAM. And so it's like stuck in my head. And I said it to you guys and then realised that stripped of any context at all, it's just a noise. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, you did have to say Vietnam.
I had to explain afterwards. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, the generation barrier here. It's just...
You don't understand, man. You weren't there in the shit with the rest of us. I wasn't in NAM. I'm not that old and I'm not American.
The thing is now, obviously, everything, like, they've updated the wars.
It's all the Gulf.
So it's all about the Stan.
About the...
Stan.
The Stan.
Afghanistan.
Is that what they call it?
Well, that's what I called it. I'm
okay.
coining that phrase despite never having been there.
We're not very cool, are we, John?
What, me? No, I'm boiling.
I did mean you. I'm amazing. 2000 AD. I'm not amazing. 2000 AD, 1901. I won't talk about it very much because I basically talk about it every time I talk about comics, and that can get boring. But it recently started a bunch of new stories, so it's a very good time to jump on. There's one story I will mention is Stickleback, because it's written by Ian Edgington with art by Disraeli and isn't like anything else. It's this weird Victorian. It's got this weird black and white art, and it's a story about a Victorian creepy guy who's got an exposed spine and has a long nose, and it's very weird, and he gets involved with murders and stuff like that. There's an action story by Pat Mills and John Higgins called Grey Suit. John and I met John Higgins at Forbidden Planet a while ago, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
He was very nice.
He was very nice.
He's also a very good artist. That's an action story, kind of a weird, superpowery action story that I haven't seen before. I don't know if Grey Suits has been in it before. That's quite interesting. Don't always get on with Pat Mills that well, so it's quite nice. And there's a story, I think it's the final book of Ichabod Azrael, written by Rob Williams with art by Michael Dowling. Gorgeous colour art that becomes gorgeous black and white art. And it's basically about this twisted up old cowboy who, in this final book, I think is going to try and kill God. He found out that Charon, the guy who, like, takes souls across the River Styx, was messing with him about this thing. He was sending him on missions and using the memory of this woman that Ichabod had loved to try and get him to do all of these missions. And then it turned out that he was lying. So now Ichabod Azrael has decided he's basically going to kill everyone. He killed Charon, so now people can't die, and now he's going to try and kill God. It's all very, very heavy duty stuff. I don't think there's going to be a happy ending, though. A couple of other books that I read this week, neither of which I knew anything about when I picked them up, and they've got really similar themes in them, actually. The first one is written by Jason Aaron with art by Ron Garney. He did, was it Wolverine and the X-Men?
Oh, like Jason Aaron.
He's good. He also did Southern Bastards, and he's done like some... It's weird that he did Wolverine and the X-Men, because he does so many sort of
it's
noir,
so different than Southern
noir
Bastards. I couldn't believe it's the same guy. I was like, okay.
And Scalped, which, if you
do you have a conflicted feeling about Scalped? I can't remember.
No, it's James and I have disagreeing opinions. James, I can understand James's point, is he thinks it comes across as slightly racist.
Because it's about Indians on the reservation.
Yeah. Despite the fact that Jason Aaron,
listening to this, yeah.
Yeah, despite the fact that Jason Aaron himself he's never actually been to a reservation, I think he says at one point. But I think the way the story presents it, I think of it as something like The Sopranos. Mm-hmm. It's basically it is a work of fiction. The entire universe it takes place in is fictional. The story is not to try and highlight the plight of Indians on the reservation or anything. It's just the reservation is the setting, and it's a fantastic crime saga. You
basically what John just did there was he he re-had the debate that he's had with James, but he did it when James isn't here. So John effectively wins that argument, which is
good.
Is pretty skillful.
Yeah.
And he'll listen back to this and he'll be like, that's the noise he makes.
That's his fault for not being here. So.
Yeah, it's true.
Or he'll just come on another week, have the debate again, and then I won't be here and he'll win.
That's true.
I'll
and
defend you.
This could go on forever.
Excellent.
But anyway, Jason Aaron and Ron Garney, it's from Icon, which I think is a Marvel imprint, isn't
it's Marvel's independent, or it's their creator-owned imprint.
It's called Men of Wrath. It's $3.50 issue, $3.50 price point. It's for mature readers, and it's much more like Southern Bastards or the other thing we were just talking about, Scout, than it is Wolverine and the X-Men. It's sort of rural. I think when I was talking about Southern Bastards, I referred to it as rural noir, which was a stupid thing to call it because I clearly can't say rural properly, but it's sort of backwoods American noir. It follows a genuinely horrible bastard who you're introduced to in the first few pages, and a family legacy of violence, which is all kind of Jason Aaron territory. It's a place where he's been before, but it starts out telling you how this family was introduced to this violent legacy, and then goes on to show you the most recent member of the family in the present day who basically kills people for money. But he's really, I can't state enough how horrible this guy is. And he finds out he's not very well, and then he is given another mission, and that's the setup for this issue. So I've said quite a lot about the story, but I haven't really given you an awful lot of detail. But what's going to happen in this story is, I think we're going to find out about where these violent traits in families come from. We're going to find out what happens when a father and a son end up having to reckon with each other, which is really actually a really similar theme to in Southern Bastards, but it's handled very differently in this. It's a much more heightened reality. Southern Bastards was already a bit of a heightened reality. This is like that again. Ron Garney's art is amazing. Actually, I didn't note who did the colour, but Ron Garney's a pretty nice artist. I think I've seen him working on Fantastic Four or something in the past. I'm not sure. But the colour in this is just amazing because he's got really clean sort of art, and Matt Miller did the colours. It makes it really dirty and gritty, which is kind of nice. I think Ron Garney's done loads of Captain America, actually. I'm confused. I'm very confused. I really liked it though. It's a great first issue, and I'm really looking forward to the next one. I don't think things are going to go nicely though. I think there's going to be, lots of killing, adult themes. I don't know. Probably not the sort of thing you want to give to your 8-year-old daughter to read, but that's...
all right.
No, I don't know. It actually, there are lots of really big words in there, so I don't know. Butterfly is another book I got from Forbidden Planet today. It's $3.99, which is not an amount of money I normally pay for comics if I can avoid it, because it seems like a lot, but it was very pretty. It's got a Phil Noto cover on the front. Phil Noto is always a good artist to have on the front of a book. So it's called Butterfly. It's written by Arash Amel, who I've never heard of before. No, that's not true. The story is by Arash Amel, who I've never heard of before. It's written by Marguerite Bennett, who I've never heard of before, and it's illustrated by Antonio Fuso, who I don't think I've ever heard of before. But it's a female character. The protagonist is female, and you kind of in this first issue get introduced to her like the character in the other book I was talking about, Men of Wrath. Her life's violent, basically. In this one, it's more of an espionage sort of a situation. You get a sense of she lost her dad when she was quite young, and she worked for the CIA. She worked for other organizations, and now she works for this shadowy organization that you don't know very much about. And that's the first few pages, and then she ends up in a situation. She's supposed to hand off some documents or something. It's supposed to be a relatively straightforward mission that goes completely pear-shaped, and none of her avenues for trying to get help work out. So she's not sure if she's been disavowed by her employer or something else is going on. And then and then the rest of the issue is about her trying to deal with that situation. She's in a really desperate situation, and you're finding out a little bit about her, but you don't find out loads about her. But at the same time, again, her father and the legacy of her family looms really large. You don't get a sense that her dad, was that weird or mysterious, but he did die overseas. And you're not sure if he was a soldier or if he was something else or what was going on. So it reminded me a bit of the TV series Alias, in that she thinks she knows what her past's been, and actually it turns out it might be a bit more complicated than that, and it's got a similar feeling to it. The art is really nice. The writing's also really nice. The art sometimes looks a bit like Sean Phillips, but it's much looser than Sean Phillips as well. So Butterfly, it's a pretty good first issue. It's only a 4-part series, so it might be worth waiting for it in book form. The thing I have noticed about Archaea Comics is our local comic shop doesn't always get them in stock. It's because Archaea isn't one of the bigger independent companies, so look around for it. You should be able to find it on Comixology as well. I don't know. You'll be able to find it somewhere, I'm sure. It's nice. I like it. Who wants to go next? John.
Okay, it'll be me then. This week I read a graphic novel called Void by Herik, Hanna and Sean Phillips. It was originally released in France in 2012, and Titan Books has now reprinted it and translated it and is releasing it in English. The story, very, very basically, it's a reasonably short graphic novel. I think it clocks in at about 50 to 55 pages. And basically it revolves around a damaged prison spacecraft that is floating through space, and the captain has gone mad and has basically hunted down and killed all of the inmates bar one. And the story literally revolves around this one inmate trying to outsmart this homicidal maniac of a captain. And it's a very, very, very tight story. It's very lean. It goes from pages where there is a lot of panels on one page. It's like, oddly enough, it reminds me a bit of Scalped, because Scalped had a habit of, I think at one point in an issue of Scalped, I counted 15 panels on one page. And this is very similar. It has very small, tight panels, and most of it revolves around this inmate trying to make his way down small, very tight corridors. And it really sort of adds to the feel of basically this sense of isolation and loneliness drifting in the middle of space. And it feels a bit like a cross between Alien and Sunshine, the Danny Boyle film. It's really good. I highly recommend reading it. The writing is very, very clever. It's very tight, but there's not actually that much dialogue. There are points where there's quite a lot of exposition and points where you're just left to kind of figure out yourself. And the story pretty much drops you in the middle and just says, right, find your own way. That's something I really like. And I also really like when science fiction is done in comics, because I think it's something that, alright, I know we've got things like Guardians of the Galaxy and obviously the Green Lanterns and whatever of the superhero world, but by and large, sort of space opera type science fiction is left very much alone, and it's something that I've noticed the French tend to do quite a lot. Sean Phillips' art is really good. I don't know what else to say about it. It's quite good though, because it kind of gives you something. If you know Sean Phillips' art, I've never heard of the writer before, but his art gives you something reasonably familiar to anchor yourself onto and kind of start finding your way through the story. I don't really want to say much more about it than that, because the whole resolution of the story is really well handled, and it's a very neat, very compact, very good story. And I think in 55 pages, that's just great. It's just something you'll pick up, read, and go, yeah, really enjoyed that. So, yeah, I recommend it to anyone.
Kind of came out of the blue, that one.
Yeah, like I said, I read it this lunchtime with some people, trying to avoid people looking over my shoulder, as some of the pages are a bit graphic in nature. So yeah, maybe not one for the 8-year-olds again.
Boobs.
Sorry. Yes, there are boobs.
Okay, yeah. So there should be a warning there. So Your review for the tagline, if they stick it on the front, Sean Phillips' artwork is familiar and there are boobs.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, Sean Phillips' boobs are familiar if you want to go down that route, but I don't know. That would look on the back of a book. Some people might take it too literally.
Yeah, that's true. What have you got to read?
Well, I picked up some of the upcoming number ones for Marvel because they seem to be doing that a lot.
They do have a lot of number ones.
It's getting really annoying now. But it's okay, I guess. Different teams coming in to work on the characters. I picked up Thor yesterday, which I was really excited about. And also there was the whole feminist debate and everything on the internet about it being a girl and a female Thor and Lady Thor and whatever. And it's very interesting to actually read through it. They don't reveal who it is.
All right.
Which is quite interesting in the first issue. They sort of set up the problem that Thor has essentially become unworthy to wield the Mjolnir. I think
Mjolnir.
Mew Mew.
The hammer.
Mjolnir. Mjolnir. I always used to say Mjolnir, and I'm pretty sure that's wrong.
I always thought it was Molyneux.
Molyneux.
No, wait, that's Peter Molyneux.
Peter Molyneux's video game.
I'm just going to call it Mew Mew now.
Mew Mew.
Mew Mew.
Mew Mew.
Yeah,
I
Mew
think
Mew.
that's a good name for a hammer.
Yeah. Well, he can't pick up Mew Mew anymore. And Odin.
I think I'm going to have to call it Mew Mew now.
I'm professional now.
No, that's good.
And Odin's really being the typical angsty dad of, you are, what are you doing? You're supposed to be my son. And then Freya's coming in and she's trying to be a very lovely, nurturing mother. So it's setting up the problem that there needs to be a Thor, which Freya mentions, and then Thor goes off to be angsty for a little bit.
Right.
That's about it.
That's what happened. So you say you don't see who she is, but does she turn up at all?
She turns up at the end of the comic, and you can see her pick up the camera? The hammer.
The hammer.
Mew Mew. She picks up Mew Mew at the end. Yes.
Okay, so that's probably a decent first issue, but might not carry the weight of all of that expectation.
Oh, it was, I found it was pretty good. I liked that even though it carried on sort of the story from Original Sin with Thor, they did explain it. So if you did sort of miss Original Sin, you can just pick up Thor. It's not a problem really.
Okay, I'm going to make myself look like way more of an idiot than people ever thought possible, which is really quite a lot.
Some of the listeners might have only just met you, John.
Okay. For all those listeners who've never met me before, I am an idiot. But I basically thought that the female Thor was going to be, like, I know Loki's become female in the past. I thought it was just going to be like this general Thor had become a female.
See, that was the general misconception that people had. That's why there was so much rage on the internet. Like, they're only making him female because of this. No, there's actually a story to it.
Okay.
There is a reason why he's become. Well, he's not Thor anymore. Essentially, yeah.
See, I thought that where I had this misconception that it was just going to be Thor had turned female, I just thought, that's quite nice. I'm glad they've done that.
All right, okay.
I was perfectly...
You're such a happy guy.
Yeah.
In some ways. About comics.
Yeah, it just made perfect sense to me. It was like, well, why not? If Loki can do it, why can't Thor?
I threw my hat in the ring really early with who I thought it was, and I was completely wrong.
Did you think it was Angela?
Yeah, I thought it was Angela.
I think everyone...
Now that I've read it, I kind of think... Can I say? I don't think it's Freya. I kind of think it's the mother, which I like.
That's so, and not just a lady. She's also
like an older lady.
She's an older lady.
Yeah,
and
she has like really cool like powers as well as it is with Freya. So if it is her, which I think I was talking to a couple of people, they think so too. I might be completely wrong. Then that would be quite interesting.
No,
I don't think speculation counts as a spoiler, so it's okay.
Yeah,
I think so because we've only got one other old lady in comics, and that's Aunt May, isn't it?
Yeah, and
that's pretty disappointing.
Yeah, there aren't enough old ladies in comics.
No one ages.
No, that's true. Nobody. If you're old at the beginning, you're fine. Otherwise, you're sort of screwed. That's a good point.
Yeah, if you're old at the beginning, like how old is Aunt May? Like she's got to be older than like Mephisto. So I don't quite understand why Mephisto had to do the whole brand new day thing to give her life back.
I don't May. I was looking at some older Spider-Man comics a few days ago and seeing her then and her being actually ancient and seeing her now and her actually being, she's just had they're not called experiments when you know how they're going to turn out. She just had an operation on her leg or something. So, so she's, the signs of aging are there, but she's pretty spry compared to how she was when I was growing up. She was ancient. So anyway, old ladies. There should be more old ladies in comics.
Yeah, more old ladies. That's
the thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
Using the term old ladies, because I've been watching a lot of Sons of Anarchy recently, and everyone refers to their sort of better halves as their old ladies. So I've now just got this image of Aunt May as some Hell's Angels
biker chick. Yeah.
I like that you said people use, I'm deconstructing what you're saying here. You said, I've been watching Sons of Anarchy. People use the term old lady to explain their better halves. There are going to be people listening who are you mean wives, right?
Wives.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
You were using one,
sorry.
one obscure term. I don't think it's that obscure, but anyway, sorry, I'm being an idiot.
Right.
So, Thor #1.
Yeah, it was very good. I definitely recommend it. Even if you've not really into comics, I think you're going to enjoy it.
Isn't that Jason Aaron as well?
Yeah, I can't remember. Do you have it on you?
I have it on me. It's Jason Aaron.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
With art by, let's just do that, shall we? Oh, why? Why don't they just put it in the front? That's so annoying.
Just has it here and that's it.
Why don't Marvel want us to know who the artists are? That's a conspiracy.
It's corporation. Oh.
But it's Jason Aaron anyway, and somebody Dauterman. Anyway, sorry.
I also picked up Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier 1, because that's going to happen now. It was okay. It was pretty good. It has an interesting sort of setup for why he's sort of gone on his own now. So he's this sort of not assassin for hire, but essentially is. It's pretty interesting. So he's sort of doing missions on his own, and the art is amazing. And I really like
really
the art.
Nice from over
it's
here.
all painted, and because it's set in sort of the universe, the galaxy, and that kind of thing. It's just such a good medium to use on the artwork. So yeah.
Oh, is it spacey?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's it's all very spacey, which is an interesting sort of setting for him.
Yeah.
Because I didn't expect that from when I heard that he's getting his own sort of solo issue.
Well, Els Cott, who's writing it, I think I saw.
Yeah.
I don't know much about Winter Soldier in the Marvel universe. I haven't seen the film either, so I don't.
I know the basic.
Yeah, I know roughly who he is and everything, but I don't know much. But Els Cott, a lot of the comics I've read of his are very espionage-y, and they're about spies, or they're very grounded on Earth and in all of that. So it's interesting that he's writing a Bucky Barnes Winter Soldier comic, and the first thing that happens is he's out in space, because Els Cott tends to write spy stories, I think
it's all like, it's still sort of espionage, and because it does have a dark feel to it. Mm-hmm. So I sort of felt hooked on that. I guess the art was a selling point for me, really.
Sorry, that page in fact, one of the things I'm liking about this is the panel layouts.
Yeah.
They're amazing.
It was so good. I was very impressed with this. And I wasn't initially going to pick it up until I sort of looked inside, I guess.
Is it Marco Rudy?
Yeah, it is Marco Rudy, yeah.
Interesting. It is a really unusual looking book.
I like that.
And I like the cover as well. And I mean, I know they say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I think
this is
in
comic
comics,
books, yeah.
you the cover's the first thing that grabs you. Mm-hmm. It's the first chance the artist and the writer have to just go, look, buy our book. And whereas a lot of comics these days tend to do pictures that reflect something that's usually happening inside the comic, that looks like a more kind of abstract, like, just image generally, and I'm not sure what's going on with the stuff behind it, but it works really well.
See, this is one of those comics that I could take to my art teacher and be like, you can't tell me off for using comic artists as research. Like, look at this. It's, I like this.
Are they still, are art teachers still like that? Because when I had a lot of trouble with my art. I had one art teacher who really liked 2000 AD, and he was the best one, and I was with him for 6 months. and then we moved schools or something. And the rest of them are all really anti-comic art.
Yeah.
but it's
No,
just
my
crazy.
art teacher absolutely loves it. I think I used Frank Miller's one. I know Frank Miller to sort of use, but I did use it because I was doing sort of contrast, and I really liked the sort of the use of contrast that he does, because it's all of it is black and white. So I used that, and he just looked at my page and walked over, like, said nothing, and I was like, oh, I was a bit miffed.
I had a very similar thing in that all the English teachers thought comics weren't really well written because
Yeah,
they
like,
had
it's not a
pictures.
legitimate art
Yeah,
form or something.
and all my art teachers, except one, thought, like, they just poo-pooed my interest in anime and manga, which I was really into at the time, and which kind of bridged a massive gap between where I sort of stopped reading American comics and then started reading them again.
Yeah.
And I had one art teacher who just looked at it and went, oh, okay, you're into that. Right. Start showing me things like Lichtenstein and H.R. Geiger.
Yeah.
And completely opens up stuff I'd never even known was possible. And it's like, right, that was all you had to do, was look at this and go, right, you've got to do something about a classic, quote-unquote, artist, so try something like that. And it's it led to me learning a lot more about art.
See, I get discouraged from it a lot. In fact, like, my teacher says I'm really safe in my artwork, so then he's like, oh no, look at this really obscure artist I found 5 minutes ago. And it sort of takes me out of my, like, focus sometimes, which is a little bit annoying.
It doesn't really engage you.
Yeah.
The thing that John said about English teachers and comics is particularly teenage boys. I mean, I'm just pulling this out of my arse, really. So, but teenage boys, I think, are a particularly high risk group for illiteracy, and they just don't read. And comics are sort of a proven thing for engaging them in reading.
Yeah.
So it's to hear that teachers. They're supposed to encourage you.
Yeah.
That's the one thing teachers are really supposed to do, is encourage you to keep thinking and, like, I don't know. It's depressing. What else did you have?
And lastly, I got Gotham Academy, which I didn't see yesterday for some reason.
I didn't see it.
We missed it completely.
Yeah.
I picked it up today. I had a little, like, read through it, and I don't pick up DC Comics at all, because the New 52 is not my thing at all. Mm-hmm. So it was nice. It's sort of separate from everything else as far as I can tell, unless there's loads of references I'm not getting. And it's sort of a story about these two gals that get up to trouble in Gotham Academy. That is essentially the premise of it. It's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm going to be picking up the second issue. It was $2.99.
$2.99.
Yeah, $2.99. It was okay. It was something to cheer me up a little bit, I guess.
Do you think? I mean, when you say about the continuity, that's quite cool, because if you don't know whether or not there's stuff you're missing, then it probably means that if there is continuity in it, then they're handling it okay.
Yeah.
I think, because it means that if there's continuity there, it doesn't affect your reading of the story, which is good.
Which is good with 52, because everything else seems a little bit too involved with each other,
Yeah.
so I don't pick up anything else.
I won't touch it.
Yeah.
Once you get one of those books in your house, you have to have all of them. That's what I think.
Because I feel like I'm missing half the story of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, this is what I was saying earlier about why I think everyone should spend 6 months in a library reading comics out of sequence, just because I think continuity is too heavily focused on these days. As when I, like, growing up with comics, I'd buy a comic and it could be any part of any story anywhere. I had no way of it, just be like, right, that's it. Read that. Oh, okay, that was fun. And I think I kind of prefer comics when there's less continuity, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's funny because we're sort of talking about a lot of the comics we talk about are still obviously part of a clear run.
Yeah.
But that's how when I started reading comics, there were loads of English comics that were weeklies that had ongoing stories. But in terms of American comics, you didn't know when you were going to find them. Certain newsagents had them, and they didn't get the same ones every month.
Yeah.
So you really, and back then it was possible to pick one up, and there'd maybe be on one page or one panel, there'd be someone had referred to something that Professor X had done in a previous issue, and then it'd actually tell you which issue it was,
Yeah,
but it didn't really impact on the
Yeah.
story at all. That's kind of how it should be. I think. So are they new characters then, these two girls?
I think so, yeah. They seem like completely new characters. They seem to have a lot of a backstory in terms of someone being someone's brother and ex-boyfriend or something like that, which was pretty interesting. I'm pretty sure the setting is just going to be Gotham Academy, but there are little like cameos from sort of iconic Gotham
characters.
Yeah, and Bruce Wayne shows up at the end, not Batman, Bruce Wayne, which was pretty interesting. And they sort of flashed the bat signal at one point, in which one of the characters goes that she hates it, which was a bit of I guess if you lived in Gotham. And
if
then there was
a kid in Gotham,
and then the massive bats every night. Like you'd wake up and then just something shining out the window. You'd be like pretty miffed as well, I guess.
So sounds like the characterization's quite nice.
It's very anime-esque.
Yeah.
I like the fact as well that it's very nicely coloured. It looks almost cel-shaded, and it's like one of the things I'm starting to realise I like a lot more in art recently is art that's a bit more kind of cartoony. So
yeah,
I like stuff that's a bit more kind of like people have slightly sort of oversized bits, and it's just
they
stuff
have oversized bits.
Yeah, that was probably not the best description.
Okay.
But in the way certain bits of like the bodies are accentuated, is that the word?
I think so.
No clue. But yeah, I like stuff that sort of goes to a more cartoony aspect because it kind of still has to be realistic, but it gets to exaggerate things slightly. And Becky Cloonan's art's always been really good for that.
It's not Becky Cloonan wrote this one though.
Yeah.
She didn't draw it.
Oh.
Right, okay, I've just shown my complete failure again.
It is. The art is by Karl Kerschl.
Kerschl.
Yeah, that's how you pronounce it.
I do like the art. It's very nicely stylised. I just saw the name Cloonan on the cover and assumed that she'd drawn it. And the thing is, Becky Cloonan has so many different styles that it could quite easily have been her.
I'm sorry, John. I shouldn't have said anything.
Why?
I should have just left you to be wrong. That was mean of me. I was being that guy.
No, that's all right. I'm glad you corrected me.
We were talking about Jessie and I were talking about Chris Bacalo earlier on, and a lot of what you just said kind of fits with his art on Uncanny X-Men.
See, I don't particularly like it with this because I'm not quite sure how old these girls are, but they sort of seem a lot more younger.
Yeah.
And I don't know who this is supposed to be aimed at. So when I was reading it, it sort of feels like a children's book. And it's rated teen. But I don't see that. Children aren't going to read this. I don't think so, at least. And I don't know if I as a teen, air quotes, really, I wasn't all that down with it, I guess.
You're an older teen, I think, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
I'm sorry, I'm saying you're past it, basically. I mean,
she's past it. What are we?
We're old. I'm just
Ancient
old.
fossils,
I've been
really.
old since about 30, and I was kind of exactly the way I am now when I was 16. Though I've always felt like I'd had enough.
What is it? What's the saying? You're an old soul or something?
I was an old soul.
Yeah.
A senile soul.
I was going to say soul's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, I can see that. So you quite like the characterization and stuff in it, but you think that maybe it's difficult to know where it's pitched because is it maybe a bit too sophisticated for younger kids?
Considering what else DC is putting out,
Yeah.
this is really detached. Which is, I guess, if you're looking for something different, this is definitely something to look at.
I'm wondering if also there's possibly something about the fact that obviously it's detached from sort of Gotham as we know it, but also I think the name Gotham is recently, possibly because of the TV series, of which there was a giant advert for it
right in the middle of the
book.
comic book.
And it kind of feels to me like they're basically putting a book out and going, so this is for people who don't know anything about Batman, but still want to kind of learn about Gotham.
Yeah. They're going to capitalize, but apparently I get the impression the series is quite like dark and not that.
Yeah, the series is quite dark and
pretty nice. I like it so far.
Yeah, I've enjoyed. There's certain little things in it that I think are a bit odd, but I think actually the acting pretty much really does lift it quite a lot. The acting is fantastic, and some of the writing in places has been really good.
Okay, well that's cool. So that was your comics as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. You've got, we don't have to talk about it, but you're reading, is that the Death of Wolverine?
I've just picked it up. I've ordered the other issues because I didn't think I was initially going to pick it up. I don't know why, but I thought it was too connected to like Savage Wolverine and Wolverine and then whatever other titles he had. But
it's got Kitty Pryde on the cover. That's always a good sign of a comic.
It's such a nice cover as well. I like covers like this. It's all shiny.
You'll grow out of that. It's fine.
No, I love them.
The 90s were a really horrible time for shiny covers.
Is it actually
so
a foil
many of
cover?
them?
No.
I always find that, like, I don't know, foil covers and all of that sort of thing, where, they were good for getting people in the door, but they were kind of, I think it was also because I watched the sequel documentary, The Image Revolution, the other night.
Yeah, I watched it the other day,
Very good documentary. My only complaint is that it felt like it cut off halfway through the history of Image. And I know it was just about the initial start-up and the founders, but I really wanted to learn more about the recent Image. But obviously in that they go into quite a lot of detail about how there was just the fact that, like, everyone says the 90s was a bad time for comics, and I don't always think that's necessarily true. I just think there were certain aspects of it that were bad.
What you're essentially saying, John, is hashtag not all 90s comics.
Oh, we went there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's, okay. There were maybe 5 really good comics out in the 90s.
Well, I was born in the 90s, so I'm not going to defend any point of view here. And, like, one of my favorite characters was created around that time and stuff, so.
Okay, I mean, alright, I understand the 90s was when we had things like the Death of Superman and the Santa Claus Superman with machine guns, which to this day remains one of my most bizarre comic memories ever. But I think it's really difficult to just take an entire decade and say, yeah, that was rubbish. Like, there was stuff that was bad, there was stuff that was good, there was stuff in the 80s that was bad, there was stuff that was good. Like, you can't say the 80s was amazing for comics.
No.
Like, just because of Watchmen or something.
I could, just for the sake of seeing how you react. But I'm not going to, because we're not going to talk about that anymore right now.
Okay.
Because now we are going to let Peter Hammerson, doing it again, this is so professional.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let Peter Hammerson do his second event management insert. Insert sounds a bit cold and clinical. His second event management mini episode thing. He's going to be talking about a Fantastic Four wedding. There. Okay, go on then, Peter. He's got his own little theme tune and everything.
Oh,
wow.
We'll see you back here in a minute, listener.
Hello, my name's Peter Hammerson, and this is Event Management. Today I begin my quest to explore comic book events through the ages. The colossal crossovers and titanic tussles that have done so much to define the American superhero comic over the last 50 years. But where to start? The 1980s, perhaps? The decade that brought us Crisis on Infinite Earths and Secret Wars did a huge amount to advance the cause of the crossover. But were they not just building on conventions already set in place? Earlier then, the golden age of the 1940s. Prime candidate here is the first crossover between the original Human Torch and the Submariner. But as important as that is it really an event? What of the first Justice Society adventure? Or the birth of the DC multiverse during the Silver Age? Well, I'm using 3 criteria to determine what I class as an event. Is it a crossover? Does it affect continuity? Does it have consequences? This first event I've chosen certainly qualifies on 2 accounts, and almost on the 3rd. The year is 1965, and this is Fantastic Four Annual 3, Bedlam at the Baxter Building, or The Wedding of Sue Storm and Reed Richards. If you're not familiar with the Fantastic Four's history, the wedding of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman had been a long time in coming. Established as a couple in Fantastic Four 1, the relationship between Reed and Sue had ebbed and flowed over the years, most notably when the Submariner stuck his impressively muscled oar in. But the love between Reed and Sue won out, and they were finally engaged. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, assisted by Vince Coletta on inks and Artie Simek on letters, turned what would have been an event in and of itself into an excuse to collide nearly every Marvel hero and villain in a humdinger of a slugfest, right in the centre of Manhattan. And if that doesn't say event to you, I don't know what could. The motivation for this brawl is provided by Dr. Doom, who incites every villain who can get there in time to attack the FF's headquarters in the Baxter Building on the wedding day itself. Of course, who gets invited to the superhero celebrity marriage of the year? Every other superhero. So the stage is set, and this is where the comic really starts to feel like an event. With such a large cast, there's little time for insightful character development. This is about stuff being cool. The main heroes get a little bit of screen time each, often facing villains traditionally connected to another hero. Daredevil takes on Hydra. Thor battles the Super Skrull. The X-Men fight Mole Man and his minions. And so it goes. The battle jumps from confrontation to confrontation, eventually culminating in a full-on battle scene. All tropes we will see time and again in events over the years. And at the last, the stakes are raised. Hydra have a bomb that threatens everyone's lives, and an invasion from Atuma and his Atlantean army is on its way. Can Reed Richards save the day and get to the chapel on time? As a standalone comic book, Fantastic Four Annual 3 is an excellent example of the energy and excitement that the Silver Age had in general, and Marvel had in particular. Stan Lee's dialogue is busy, bombastic, and occasionally slightly at odds with the art, and that's how it should be, of course. Jack Kirby's pencils, meanwhile, are exactly as spectacular as you'd expect. The heroes and villains fairly crackle with power. The fight scenes are complicated, chaotic, but there's a clarity there. The action is easy to follow. The climax is actually something of a typical Silver Age trick, but don't get distracted by that. The thrill here is seeing the Thing talking to Professor X, seeing Thor hurl his hammer through the Super Skull's ship, seeing Tony Stark turning up wearing a top hat, of all things. Fantastic Four Annual 3 has been reprinted many times, but I'd recommend seeking it out on Comixology, where it's available as a beautifully bright and crisp download for a couple of pounds. Well worth it for a short slice of comic book history. That wraps things up for today, but please let me know if you agree with my choice of the first comic book event. Let me know on Twitter, where I'm at PYTYRH. Thank you for listening.
Cool. God, I'm so professional. That was amazing. Right, we're not going to talk about 90s comics right now.
That's fine.
This has gone on long enough. We're also, although I do want to talk about it at some point in the future, because I think it's interesting ground to cover, we're going to talk, not now, but later, about how Jessie handles the way she feels about Rob Liefeld in connection to the way she feels about
That's
Deadpool.
That's going to get really angry.
Yeah, not right now. We'll leave a few episodes before we start getting angry, okay?
That's good.
So, I think it just remains for us to probably go. Do either of you have anything comic-y you want to say? Not about the 90s, John. Not about the 90s.
Resist.
In which case, if it's not about the 90s or Transformers, I'm pretty much done for the evening.
Thank you, listener. You have been patient, as always, which is I say as always because there were so many other podcasts before, but this is only the second one. I have to understand that some people might only just be starting to listen. Thank you, listener. You've been patient for the second time with us. You're great. If you enjoyed this episode, or even if you didn't enjoy this episode, please tell loads of people about it. Even if it's just to point and make fun of us. The way the internet works is people share everything, and then, other people can decide what they
send us hate. We like hate.
We were once told a very long time ago, James and I, anyone who just started listening to the podcast has never heard James's voice.
No.
So they might think I've made him up.
Yeah, people are going to think he's not real or something. Yeah.
He's an imaginary story. He's a what if story.
Yeah.
But someone told us a very long time ago that you haven't really arrived until you get hate mail, and we haven't ever had any. Because in the 5 years of podcasting I've done, I've never had any hate mail.
I'll send us hate mail.
Okay, good. That'll do.
Okay,
that's not weird at all.
Yeah.
Something else I should mention. If you are subscribed to the show on any of the places that you subscribe to, over the course of this week, you will probably be seeing little mini episodes, sometimes not that many episodes. Not us. They are other people that I have asked to record a little bit about comics, just because generally I like them and they're better known than us. So I'm kind of hoping that A, they'll say some really interesting stuff, and B, all of the people who like them will come and listen to the podcast. But yeah, so you'll be getting these little bonus episodes. Think of them as a bonus. Don't think of them as something that's clogging up your podcast thing. These are all nice, interesting people. I have chosen them deliberately that way. Anyway, so there's that. Yes. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
It's always lovely to see you.
It's always lovely to see you as well.
And thank you, Jessie. I think this was a very successful first podcast.
I feel so new still. Oh.
You're doing fine. It's okay. Most people, when they start, have to get really drunk. And as far as I know, you haven't.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't tell me this.
Well,
I would have come prepared.
No, I mean, it's not like you don't have to. I'm just saying most people need to.
I think it's just because there's a sign up saying no food and drink. As I walked in to come here, my first thought was, the bar's open. I could just stop in, grab a pint, chuck that down my neck, and...
We're recording in a university about 30 seconds away from the Student Union bar. You see, that's what John's alluding to there. But we're going to be good. Some of us have homes to get to. All of us have homes to get to.
I was going to say, yeah. We are.
So thank you, John. Thank you, Jessie.
Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Kehaar. Thank you, listener. You're awesome. We shall see you in some configuration or another next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, John did the old bye-bye. That's cute.